Hi everyone, happy Women History Month. My name is Lisa Huang-North and I'm currently a product lead at Planet, a space technology company that's using space to help life on Earth. In celebration of Women History Month, I've had the amazing opportunity to speak with 8 product leaders over the past few months. And today, I'd love to share their stories with you in this 8-part interview series, which I'm calling The Paths to Product. Today, we'll get to hear the story of Becky Flint, who is currently the CEO of Dragon Boat. So maybe we can start with an introduction. Just love to hear a little more about your journey.
Thank you very much for having me. Product management is it's a relatively new, but it's also a career has been happening for a very, very long time. And it's just we didn't have that term. I started it in science, medical science, and I came over to here to go to business school. And I want to learn business so I can take my science background into something that's applicable in the real world. And next thing you know, the first web come and everyone be like going to the startup and trying to build product. And I was trying to build websites for customers. That was the Shopify of the day, except it's at a very small scale. And as I was working with the developers, working with the customers, trying to build a website for them, I didn't realize my job was basically product manager, right? You take customer needs and then to build a website to fulfill their needs. And then the engineer said, oh, you guys have to listen to Becky on prioritization and what to build because she's a project manager. I said, oh, okay, that's my job as a project manager. And next thing you know, I was in project management for many years and landed in PayPal. What I didn't realize that what I did was actually product management, was more on the product management side of project management. So then I landed into the role in program management as a project management, expand to broader, you manage product roadmaps. So I was working with the product managers, multiple product managers to create product roadmaps across multiple product area to become a little mini portfolio, which is actually a PayPal credit product. Now it's $1 billion product. As I was working through that, and I worked with the product manager a lot more than some of others, then I said, hey, why not go to actually do product instead of working with the product? So I jumped into product. And the day I realized that product management has a couple interesting commonalities across the roles in that it is a mindset. You find a problem and then you try to solve a problem. It is also a skill that you need to balance the needs because there's no perfect on anything. And then finally, you have to realize you have to deliver value along the way. If you take the product management mindset, I'd build a process of how product management work together, how program management support product, how we do portfolio management, how we work with the finances and accounting and headcount and budget. We build a process as a product, which is a product, right? Solve a problem, everyone else use it, you evolve it, and then you adapt and adjust, and you have metrics to see. So that will really let me to say, well, there's a process product is broken because there's no product to support the process. So eventually I want to start a company called the Dragon Boat, which really is taking the best practices of running product organization and make that into a product itself, become an enabler of the organization sit on top of it.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of the time as kind of end users ourselves, most of what we think of when we think of product are traditionally more B2C or kind of business to customer, direct consumer, the Uber, Airbnb, Gmails of the world. Right. That's where as individuals we're very familiar with because we have the apps on our phones and it's part of our life. But I think you touched on a really good point, which is, well, what about the other aspect of our life? And most of our waking hours are spent at work, doing work, delivering results. That expectation of ease of use, great user experience, intuitive workflow. Effectively, we've been trained as individuals to expect the best. And of course, it makes sense naturally for that to be a desire we have at work as well. Right. Where the tools we're using, while we're still achieving business objectives, delivering products, whatever it may be, those tools should feel almost as intuitive as what we use in our daily life as well. I'd love to hear a little more because I think once you're more seasoned as a PM, then you start hearing about portfolio management. So can you share a little more about that?
Yeah, excellent question. As shared earlier, I came to US, went to business school. And at that time, there are all sorts of concentrations you can pick, right? So the marketing and so forth. And then one of them is the finance. And I thought, yeah, you don't need to learn marketing, right? Who just fluff stuff. So finance is something you have to learn.
Such a B
Well,
school thing to say, but yes.
right? You know how
Yes.
wrong I was. It was totally wrong. But anyway, that's the choice I made. I went to finance. I learned something in finance, and one of them is a portfolio, and which turned out to be helpful. Now, I wish I took a little bit more serious about marketing because that's a very, very important topic. Go to another day. The portfolio concept, I took it a little bit further in terms of how we look at things. Most of the people have heard something called you have a retirement portfolio, I have a personal finance portfolio, something, right? The idea of a portfolio is that you have a number of things that help you to generate the outcome you make. Use the retirement portfolio, for example. You could be fresh out of school, fairly young. You just start to build your nest egg. You say, okay, I'm going to save some money for my future, right? So you start to build your small portfolio, and then later on you get bigger and bigger. The concept of portfolio is that you have a number of things you can do, and you don't really know for sure which one will drive there. So stock and bonds, let's say use the most basic one. Traditional people understand is a stock is a riskier and with a higher potential for return, where bond is a less risky and with a lower potential of return. And then you can say, I'm gonna, if I'm younger, I want to take more risk because I have more time. If I'm older, I would take less risk because I may need money sooner, so I don't want to be in the downtime. So that's a thought around that. But you take that thought into the things you do. Mm-hmm. If you are a product manager, if you run a product, your product would have to serve a number of purposes. For example, your product have a few customers. Let's using the example of Amazon. If you think about Amazon, just very basically, you will have people buying and people selling. You already have two customers, right? So buying and selling. Obviously, there are a lot more other segments, just two. So when you build a product, you need to make sure you would account for the buyer's experience and needs, and also account for sellers, because either one are breaking, that's bad. Even if you don't have something that big, simple mobile app, people just play with it. You also have to consider your customers, such as your new customer who's never exposed to your app. And then they have to figure out how to use it. You have to make it easy. And you have existing customers. They already know everything. So you can't just build things to make it easier to use. But your existing customers say it's boring. It's nothing new to explore. So you have to balance. The portfolio approach will help you to make it the hardest decision, in that you cannot just say, I only care about this segment, not the other. It's always a balance. Think about portfolio theory is that the allocation itself at the right time based on the needs and the desire and the risk, the allocation itself is the most impactful thing for the outcome of your portfolio than the individual picking of things, because we just don't know for sure which one going to generate what we have. So when you allocate it well, you will be okay. When you build a feature, you don't really know, is this really going to drive engagement? We have a guess. We don't really know. So that means you do have to take your bets a little bit and then allocate somewhat, so that if one thing miss, you're not going to have all your eggs in one basket, right? Yes. So that's the concept of portfolio management for product management.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think the analogy of a financial portfolio makes sense, because similarly for businesses, they're trying to achieve business outcomes, whether that be increase revenue, reduce costs, increase customer satisfaction, maintain retention. All of these are ultimate goals. And the way that product organization or the product team defines and build out roadmap, effectively it's hedging of the risk, whether it be actual separate products or just separate features, and in ways to try to appeal to different segments, and even along the customer journey. When someone's onboarding, they might need really great user workflow and tutorial and tooltips. But by the time they're a power user, they might find a pop-up tutorial to be very distracting because they just want to get to it and get it done. I know you have helped to build up the program management function at PayPal. For those who are not as familiar with product and program, how would you differentiate where the handoff happens and what the difference in roles and responsibilities are?
Very, very good question. I always tell people like this. If you want to know the differences in roles, you go to a really big company. Because at that time, the scope of every role is so big, they have to split, right? So split to be more specialized. When you go to a small company, these roles are mixed up so that it's very hard to say what is a product, what is a program. We don't have program. I say, well, you cannot run without a program, right? Let's say take a very, very bigger company concept, so where every role, most of the roles are very specialized. They use a product, a program, engineering, design are kind of like intertwined pieces of a puzzle. If you have a UX or design, their key role is to make sure customer have a good experience. They have their problem solved. The product managers that understand customers' problem, design a solution to solve that problem. If you really look at the nuances, product manager not only will worry about the actual user experience, they also think about the business outcome, because the product has to generate revenue where UX do not need to consider that as much. Also, product needs to make sure from an engineering perspective, it can be built in a relatively reasonable time. It's not gonna, because you could create a design, would take it forever to build. So the compromise you have to do for the design, the ultimate user experience, with what is engineering is capable and take amount of time into consideration, as well as the business outcome, is how much ROI I'm going to generate in terms of this feature versus the business outcome I'm going to get. So a lot of these conversations, considerations, the difference between product and the UX design. Why I say that is because people tend to tie these things together, then they have a hard time to understand what the difference is. The same thing for program management. As a product manager, what you typically focus on in the area as the product, you focus yourself. You also tend to have a team that's quote unquote your team. You work with them. You will say, these are the priorities. These are user needs, how we build it. Obviously, it's collaborative. Product management manage one roadmap. Program management tend to look at more than just your area. Program managers manage multiple roadmaps. What do I mean by that is that when the product manager says, I have a roadmap, you think about it in the lens of the product itself. Here's where the product needs to be, and here's how I get there, right? You think about it from a product customer experience perspective. When you talk to an engineering team, that the same Scrum team working with us as product manager, they also have a roadmap, but it's not the same as a product manager's roadmap. Why? Because that Scrum team most likely will focus on most of the work coming from the product manager. They could also have work from another product managers or even more
resources.
So it's a dependency, right? So if I'm building a mobile app, chances are I will probably need platform teams, and maybe I need a data science team. I need multiple teams, and these teams also have other product managers come to them. There's some skills and needs to say, how do I take all the input from different places and figure out the best way so that we can deliver to these product and customer needs in the best way possible. And the best way possible varies depending on where you are as a company, where you are as a product, and then where your technology platform lays at this current state. So the program management part of things is to say, how do I reconcile the needs of the product itself, and then the team that takes different inputs and then make a sense out of all of that so that my product doesn't get stuck because I needed 3 teams to work on my product feature, or the teams don't get stuck trying to say, where do I even go? So program management is the skill to tie these pieces together. Basically make sure people are aligned and don't get blocked, and then work on the best outcome for the company at that point. So the program manager, in some ways, the portfolio management skills are required because all of a sudden you look at a collective output, not just one team's or one product manager's output.
That's great. Thank you. I'm a visual thinker, so I tend to, as you're talking, I'm trying to find mental models that resonate. And I think one of the idea that resonate is program management in some way. It's almost like a conductor of an orchestra. So to your point, there's multiple players. You have violin, you have drums, you have trumpet. In this case, there are design, there are software engineering. And within software engineering, different software engineering team, platform, API, front end, back end, etc. And product manager, their role is they might be kind of the first violin. They do have leadership responsibilities. They are pacing kind of the violinist, and they are actually showing, okay, do we go faster? Do we go slower? But at the end of the day, the conductor is the one who's standing in front with almost a bird's eye view over all the participants and all the players, and really coordinating so that the right timing is going up and the right player are invited onto the stage per se.
Totally, yeah.
Shifting gear a little bit, part of Dragon Boat, as you mentioned, is your kind of vision and dream for building the tools that are of the highest quality and to help people do their job in the most painless way possible, because enterprise tools should be as easy to use as we use in our daily life for our personal apps or personal tools. So
Right.
can you share a little bit about what eventually prompted you to start DragonBoat?
It's a very interesting profession. I grew up at PayPal. I started when the PayPal was only in 5 countries. I led international expansion programs. Ultimately, our teams led the expansion to over 200 countries. And then we had to go expand and grow multiple product lines and so on and so forth. So we have to build infrastructure to support it, the portfolio management, and then the spreadsheets to do that. And as I go from company to company, I realize that the need is always there. It's not just had to be PayPal. I joined this couple thousand to 20,000 people when I left. When I go to other companies, Shutterfly was 2,000 and BigCommerce was 300, and then the company goes smaller and smaller, but the complexity is the same. Because regardless of how big and how small you are, you always have competing needs. You always have many teams need to work together. Ultimately, the challenge is this: how do you enable autonomous teams at the same time also achieve alignment and orchestrated outcome? And that needed 2 things. One, you needed people who knows that's a problem and design that process. And 2 is you need a tool to support that. Now, if you have someone who's very experienced, knows how to do it, they can create a bunch of spreadsheets and then you can use that. And one is not everyone necessarily knows. So then your best practice is not being captured anywhere. You basically really rely on people creating spreadsheets. That's not a sustainable best practice. Secondly, even you're a very savvy, experienced person, spreadsheet takes a lot of time. I mean, for me, I literally spend my Sunday afternoon writing updates. That's just a small part of it. Whenever you have to do trade-offs, you have a dependency. This is taking a lot of time. It's like half of a very seasoned program manager's time spending on dependencies, negotiations, and the status updates, if not more. And most of these time can be automated with the tools so that you can really focus on strategic stuff. That's the intent of DragonBoat, is to replace the spreadsheets that I built from a company to company. A lot of other people build as well, and have the best practice on top of it. So then it's also flexible enough so that you can do your own program and portfolio management, or you can collectively, the bigger scope, to do program portfolio management across the teams. So that you can even start small, do your own thing, or you can just combine pieces together to look at the whole company as a whole. One is you have a practice that's well understood and improved upon. And 2 is the tooling make it easier. Now, one using example of Agile and Jira. Most people know Jira. It's one of the most popular tools about Scrums. Jira would never be as successful if the Agile really never happened. But at one point, people realized the waterfall won't work. It's just too restrictive. I cannot define everything. You need to be iterative. We need to have a collaboration. Team has to be given autonomy. And that will say, okay, we're going to practice Agile, because now everyone said, well, if you go to companies that don't do that, it's like weird, right? I don't really know any company. But you can never get there if you didn't have a tool like Jira. How can you do Agile? You can't really have a spreadsheet to do that.
Just the maintenance of hoping everyone would do their backlog grooming on spreadsheet. Can you imagine?
You could, right? You could, but do you really need a Scrum Master to do that?
Sure.
Because who's gonna own that spreadsheet?
Yes.
But if you have a tool, you can decentralize to the team, which is autonomous team, but you have alignment. Same thing for DragonBoat. We know program and portfolio management is required. Regardless you have the job title or not, it's just a part of the skill to run a effective product organization. So how do you do that? There's a way to do that, right? You can tie objectives, you can have alignment, you have resources, you have allocations, all that good stuff, portfolio program skills. But it can be baked in the tool so that everyone have access to it. So then you can be a lot more efficient, a lot faster. That's basically our vision, is to say, we become the boat, right? So lift you up, propel you forward. So you don't have to swimming in the water and try to make your way to wherever you want to be.
And making sure everyone's rowing in the same direction as well. As Chinese, for me, the dragon boat symbol is really powerful, because I definitely grew up going to dragon boat races. And again, one of the thing that always stand out. Someone at the front of the boat playing the drum so that they're helping to keep pace for the rest of the team, ensuring that the team is rolling in the same direction at the right pace at the right time. As you're sharing the importance of tool to codify processes, something that just occurred to me is we already have that mental model in other places. The reason why software engineers are able to get up to speed quickly, onboard quickly, and be productive quickly is because they have these shared conventions, whether that be open source libraries, or if you come from kind of Ruby on Rails world, there's a lot of mental models and scaffolding, or even quick start templates. And all of those are, I think the terminology within software engines, those are opinionated frameworks, because the people who designed it has a strong opinion about how to do things, quote unquote, the right way or the most efficient and productive ways. So we definitely see this in other functions. And I think what I'm hearing is with Dragon Boat, using the tool and using software and technology, you're codifying some of that process for best practice across small startup up to kind of really large tech companies.
Codified process is super important, and then the process can be improved on. When you have a process that's proven working, there's no reason for anyone to reinvent the wheel, to just try to practice one more time. And then people don't like the word process. They feel like that's a bad, that slow you down. But it's not true. That's a bad
loaded word.
It's a bad process. You think about your process as a product. You design it, you use it, you improve it. And then you trim the dead ones, like a tech debt. You talk about tech debt, there's a process debt. Process, it doesn't apply to you anymore. It was there for a reason. If that reason is gone, kill it. So when you build your process and trim it and manage it like a product, then you have a good process, you work well. All our computers run a process. Process is actually an engineering word. All the things to run our process is well-defined. The same thing for organizations, how we work together. It's a contract and the interactions, the microservices.
So I think the last question for you is, what is one piece of advice you would give to your, 20-something-year-old self?
Very good question. I think about that a lot. I think end of the day is that if I were to go back to relive my life again, I don't think I'm going to change anything, except one is I will trust myself more. In that when you want to do something, just do it. You ask yourself, what's the worst going to happen? Right? If you can accept the worst, just do it. When I start a company, I ask myself, what's the worst going to happen? I said, what's going to happen is it didn't work. So I'm going to go find another job. Can I live it? I think I can live it for 2-3 years. Okay, let's just go for it. So ask myself, what's the worst going to happen? Do I accept that? If I do, just do it. If I don't accept the worst case, what kind of I tear it back a little bit to the point I can accept that worst case scenario, do it.
I think that is so important to hear. For myself too, I think every time I've made a career transition of some sort, it was going through kind of that old school way of, okay, take a piece of paper, write down the pros, write down the cons, look between the two, and if I can live with the cons, which to your point, if you can live with the worst case scenario, then go for it. When you first started, you mentioned that we're all result or a accumulation of our lived experiences, and we are who we are today because of what we have tried out, the risk we have taken, the leaps of faith we've taken. That's a wonderful note to close on. Thank you so much for your advice. I really appreciate it. For most folks, as they're beginning to think about taking those career transition changes or taking that first steps, I'm hoping that this interview with Becky will help to give you some confidence and help demystify, I think, the difference between product, program management, talking about the tools, portfolio, processes, a lot of important tidbits there. Becky, if anyone has any questions, are they able to reach out to you somewhere?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Sure, I include the link to your LinkedIn profile as well. Wonderful. I hope you enjoyed today's interview series, and be sure to check back to hear from the other 7 amazing product leaders. Thank you, and happy Women's History Month.